Mademoiselle Bardot, perhaps you can explain to this room what the political philosophy of your own film actually means, since you seem unable to grasp it yourself. The critic's voice carried across the Cannes press conference room. The microphone amplified each word into every corner. 40 journalists stopped writing. Pens froze mid-sentence. Hands remained suspended above notebooks. Cameras lowered along both walls. 3 photographers exchanged glances. One shook his head. The moderator's hand moved toward his microphone, stopped halfway, fingers splayed in mid-reach, withdrew slowly, back to the table. A journalist in the second row closed her notebook. The soft thud of paper on paper broke the quiet. She set her pen down beside it, crossed her arms, eyes fixed on the table. The critic leaned forward, his hands pressed flat on his notepad. 17 years of authority in every gesture. I've spent the morning watching actresses pretend to understand material they've memorized, repeating lines, following direction. His voice took on a lecture rhythm. So let's be honest, do you actually comprehend Rousseau, or are you simply repeating what your director told you to say? Bardot sat still. Her hands rested on the table, both palms flat against the white tablecloth. One finger touched the edge of a script lying in front of her, pages bent from use, corners folded, margins filled with blue ink, handwriting dense along both sides of every page. She looked at him, held his gaze. Her expression didn't change. No flinch, no blink. What had the critic written in the days before that made the festival organizers warn her this would happen? Why had she brought that specific annotated script to a press conference about a different film screening? And what was written in those margins that made her bring it here? If you're interested in untold stories from cinema's golden age, subscribe now. This is a fictionalized dramatization inspired by real public figures and historical settings. It does not depict a documented event. 2 weeks earlier, the festival committee had confirmed her film's competition slot. 40 minutes of closed-door discussion, phone calls to Paris, final vote unanimous. The studio pushed for a period piece, French Revolution themes, class struggle, political philosophy woven through every scene of dialogue. Bardot spent 12 days in rehearsal, working with a philosophy professor the director hired specifically for this. Sessions in a borrowed Sorbonne office, 3 hours each afternoon. She annotated one script copy with her own analysis. Blue ink filled every margin, notes connecting dialogue to source texts. Rousseau, Voltaire, Diderot. The Critic published a preview 3 days ago, front page of the arts section. The headline called her casting proof that beauty sells tickets while intelligence sells nothing. 1,500 words arguing actresses contributed decoration, not interpretation, not thought. He'd built 17 years of columns on this premise. The script she'd brought today wasn't for the film screening this afternoon. It was the preparation copy, the one from the Sorbonne sessions. Her handwritten notes connected every line of dialogue to historical philosophy texts. Page 47 alone had 12 margin notes. References, questions, connections. Nobody knew she'd brought it. She hadn't told anyone. The critic adjusted his glasses, pushed them up the bridge of his nose, settled them into position. His colleague 2 seats over shifted. The chair scraped against the floor, wood on wood, creating visible distance. Physical gap. A photographer near the door raised his camera, brought it to eye level, checked the frame, anticipating. The script remained where Bardot had placed it, exactly where, pages slightly open, to somewhere in the middle, blue annotations visible, even from several rows back, even through the smoke, the handwriting dense, covering margins on both sides. "I'm waiting," the critic said, his tone sharpening, voice taking an edge. He picked up his pen, deliberately, with theatrical precision, positioned it over his notebook, tip-touching paper, ready to write, as if preparing to record her inadequacy, for posterity, for the 3 newspapers that would run his column tomorrow morning, on the front page of their arts sections. A journalist in the front row turned, her whole body rotating, to look at him directly, then at Bardot, holding there, then back at him, the movement drawing attention, making others turn. The moderator's assistant took 1 step forward, from his position against the back wall, arms uncrossing, into the room proper, stopped, uncertain, froze mid-step. Bardot's finger moved along the script's edge, traced the binding, stopped at a folded corner. The movement was minimal, a shift of millimeters. 3 journalists in different rows leaned forward, 1st row, 3rd row, 5th row, all watching her hand. A camera clicked once. The shutter sounded sharp in the quiet. The overhead lights caught the cigarette smoke. Layers hung motionless above the table, gray, white, pale blue in the brightest spots. The critic's hand tightened around his pen. A journalist in the fifth row glanced at her watch, then at Bardot, then at the critic. The script lay between them. Blue annotations caught the light. The room went quiet. The murmur that had run underneath the entire exchange disappeared. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Whispers died. Photographers stopped adjusting their equipment. Hands froze on camera dials, on aperture rings, on focus wheels. Nobody moved a lens. Nobody changed position. The critic set his pen down. Deliberately, with force. The tap of plastic on wood echoed across the space. "This is what I expected," he said. His voice rose, louder now. Silence when actual thought is required. Silence when analysis is needed. Beauty when intelligence fails. Surface when substance is demanded. His hand gestured toward her, palm up, presenting, as if offering evidence to a jury. Two photographers stepped closer to the table, one from the left, one from the right, cameras raised. All eyes turned to the script. Every gaze in the room converged on the table. The blue ink in the margins was visible from the front rows. From the second row, dense handwriting covering both sides of every visible page, underlines beneath specific phrases, arrows connecting thoughts across paragraphs, question marks in corners, exclamation points, numbers referencing other pages. A journalist in the third row tilted her head, trying to read the annotations from her angle, squinting slightly, leaning left in her chair. The script lay there between them. Physical evidence on the white tablecloth. Her hand still touched the edge, one finger resting against the binding. His gesture pointed directly at it, index finger extended, arm straight. 40 witnesses watched the space it occupied. A journalist in the fourth row stood slightly. Weight shifted forward in his seat, knees lifting off the chair, trying to see the annotations better through the glare of overhead lights. Through the cigarette smoke, the person behind him cleared his throat, sharp, loud. The journalist sat, dropped back into his chair. The moderator picked up his water glass, both hands wrapped around it, held it without drinking, watching. The surface rippled from the tremor in his fingers. He set it down, carefully. Water sloshed against the sides. "Perhaps someone should have prepared you better," the critic continued. Political philosophy isn't something one simply absorbs through proximity to a director's vision. Through being present on set, it requires study, real study, analysis, line by line, intellectual rigor, hours of work. He paused, drew breath, qualities that. He stopped, adjusted his collar, pulled at it, started again, voice firmer, qualities that cinema values in men. A photographer along the right wall lowered his camera, changed the angle, movement slow. The journalist beside the critic shifted in her seat, created space between them, a visible gap. Her notebook stayed closed, pen resting across the cover. The moderator's hand moved toward the microphone, hesitated, withdrew. The critic's voice filled the silence. 17 years I've watched directors elevate material through casting choices that serve the story, not the marketing department. His hand gestured, encompassing the room. 17 years watching those choices fail when beauty replaces substance. 3 journalists exchanged glances. One shook his head, barely visible. The script lay between them, pages still slightly open. Bardot's hand had moved away now, resting flat on the table, 6 inches from the cover. A journalist in the second row leaned forward, eyes moving from script to Bardot's face to the critic's face. Back. The pattern repeated. No one moved. The stillness was complete. No shifting in seats, no rustling of papers, no cameras clicking. A journalist in the third row wrote something down, pen moving in quick strokes. Another near the back stood, gathering his materials, movements controlled, deliberate. The door opened, closed. The thud marked something. The critic's colleague began organizing his papers. Didn't look up. Bardot reached for the script. Her hand moved across the table. Fingers closed around the pages. She lifted them, held them at reading height. She set the script flat, rotated it toward the critic. Her finger touched a margin note. "The general will cannot err, because it seeks only the common good." Rousseau, scene 47. She looked up. "Your question assumes I haven't read it." The critic's pen stopped moving across his notebook. The tip rested on paper. No words formed. His mouth opened, stayed open. 1 second. 2 full seconds. Jaw slack. Closed. Opened again. No sound. No words. Nothing emerged. A photographer's camera fired. Once. The flash bright. Twice. Another flash. 3 times. Rapid succession. Motor drive whirring. The mechanical sound loud in the stillness. The moderator's shoulders dropped. Visible release of held tension, from near his ears down to their normal position. The change in posture obvious even from the back rows. A journalist in the front row began writing, hand moving faster, pen scratching across the page, the sound audible, creating lines of text, filling the margin, moving to a new line. Another journalist leaned toward his colleague to his left, whispered behind his hand, cupped palm blocking his mouth. Words inaudible, intention clear. Both turned their heads, in unison, looked at the script, lying open on the table. Between Bardot and the critic's face had changed, transformed completely, jaw muscles tight, visible from several rows back, clenched, pulsing slightly, flush spreading across his cheeks, across the bridge of his nose, down his neck, red spreading on pale skin, visible color change. He reached for his water glass, hand extended, fingers fumbled on the first attempt, missed, tried again, gripped it properly, brought it to his lips, tilted it, drank, throat moving with each swallow. A journalist who'd closed her notebook earlier was writing again. Pen moving, in heavy decisive strokes, pressing hard into the paper, recording more than just the words spoken, the tone, the silence, the shift visible even from her seat in the third row. A photographer changed position, moving from his spot along the left wall toward the center of the room, better angle on the table, on the script lying there, on the 2 faces, his camera bag scraped against a chair back, the sound sharp, loud. Someone said sure, quietly, hissed it. The photographer froze, mid-step, 1 foot raised, then continued, more carefully now, lifted the bag, rather than dragging it, placed each foot with exaggerated care, toe first, then heel, silent steps. The critic cleared his throat. The sound came out wet. Yes, but... He stopped. His hand went to his collar. Adjusted it. The script, of course, contains... He stopped again. His colleague stood, excused himself past knees and bags, headed for the exit, didn't look back. Another journalist raised his hand. Question forming. The moderator pointed at him. Mademoiselle Bardot, the journalist said. His tone different. How long did you spend with the source material? The question hung there. The room processed what had happened. The script stayed on the table, pages open to the annotated section. 3 journalists craned forward, trying to read the blue handwriting. A photographer near the door lowered his camera, checked his film. The mechanical sound of advancing the roll carried across the space. The critic tried once more. I merely meant. His voice trailed off, lost volume, disappeared into nothing. He looked down, at his notes, at the page filled with his own handwriting, at the space, the blank space, where he'd expected to write her stumbling response, her inability to answer. His pen touched the page, lifted, hovered, touched again. No writing, no words forming. He set it down, released it. It rolled slightly, on the slanted notebook surface, settled, came to rest against the binding. The critic gathered his materials, notebook, pen, press credentials, stood, moved down his row. Excusing himself past other journalists, they didn't look up. The door opened, closed. A journalist 2 seats from where he'd been marked, something in her notebook. Heavy underline, visible to those nearby. 5 seconds passed, no one speaking, each second feeling longer than the last. A photographer near the back wall adjusted his lens, fingers turning the focus ring. The faint click of the aperture ring, the only sound. 10 seconds. The moderator's assistant shifted weight, from left foot to right, the movement drawing attention. 3 heads turned toward him, then away. Eyes returned to the table, to the script, to the space between Bardot and where the critic had been sitting. 15 seconds. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. A journalist in the 4th row uncrossed his legs. Slowly, deliberately, crossed them the other way. Left over right instead of right over left. The wool fabric whispered, brushed against itself. The sound somehow loud. In the absolute quiet, someone 3 rows behind him coughed, softly. Into his hand, caught himself mid-cough, suddenly aware of the noise, stopped abruptly, cut it off. The silence stretched further, elastic, refusing to break. The script remained exactly where Bardot had placed it, moments before, open to the page, with her blue annotations, evidence of preparation, of study, of hours spent with philosophy texts that the critic had publicly claimed didn't exist, couldn't exist, not in someone who looked like her. 20 seconds. A photographer lowered his camera. Another raised his. The motorized advance of film broke the quiet, ended, returned the room to stillness. The moderator picked up his microphone, set it down, picked it up again. Next question, please. Journalists clustered after the moderator called time. Photographers moved toward the table, cameras raised. The 4 empty seats looked different, a gap everyone noticed. The script stayed on the table, moved aside but visible, pages bent from study, margins covered in analysis, proof of work the critic had insisted couldn't exist.